But we're going to continue in English because we have a lot of speakers and a lot of panelists who came a long way just to be here with us today. And also we came a long way from just using our keypad and mouse to communicate with our computers. We have mobile phones in our pockets, which require a far more intimate touch with them. We tap, we swipe left, sometimes we swipe right, if we're lucky. They're still smiling over here. Yeah, maybe we saw each other later, yeah. Don't go there, don't go there. But what's next? How will we communicate with our devices in the future? Now, our first speaker, we're bringing out the big guns for this first speaker. He's the man who is very easy to hate. Trust me. I saw his bio, and I hated him just 5 minutes later. If you want to windsurf, he's your man. If you want to fly a helicopter, he's your man. He speaks all the languages in the world, and he knows everything. That's what his biography said right here, I think, yes. But here to talk about the next generation of user experience is a guy who grew up not so far from Zagreb, but now lives in the heart of California. He's a serial entrepreneur and is considered one of the leading mobile product visionaries in the Silicon Valley. Please welcome Mr. Nick Bicanic. Give him a warm welcome, please. Very easy to hate. Very easy to hate.
Thank you. You know, you shouldn't believe everything you read in a bio, but in this case, I think some of it is accurate. Thank you, guys. Nikola, može Nikola isto, ali na engleskom ću ovog puta. So yeah, I'm going to continue in English because it's easier for me. Hopefully, I won't be too fast. That's my name. I was born in Fulnegovićevo naselje, which is not too far away from here. I now live in Venice Beach. And as our man was so kind to indicate, I'm going to be talking about the future of UX. But let me take a second to describe what UX means. So the acronym UX stands for user experience. It used to be more commonly referred to as UI. UI just meant user interface. But user experience overall encompasses absolutely everything to do with how we interact with computers or software. In fact, it encompasses everything we do with how we interact with any objects. So, for example, this water bottle, the UX of this water bottle is you pick it up, you unscrew the top, and you drink it, then you put it down again. So, overall, the reason why I think, the purpose of this talk is to describe where we came from, where we are today as far as UX is concerned, and where are we going. And here's Robert Downey Jr. in Iron Man, just to give you an idea of what Hollywood thinks is the future of interaction with computers. So, what's he doing? I don't actually even know, I don't remember the scene, but he's waving his hands around interacting with Jarvis, and there's some sort of holographic image in his lab. So yes, in theory, some version of the future of UX looks like this, and I look like Robert Downey, but neither of those two things are entirely true. So let's talk about the past, the present, and the future of UX, just to give you some context before I jump right into what I think the future is. Is everyone okay with the speed? Do you want me to go slower, faster? Good? Everything's good. Okay, cool. So, past. You can tell I spent a lot of time on this graphic. This is a hammer. So, and this is a very deliberate example because originally, tools, software, computers, hardware, software and hardware, however you're interacting with technology, whether it's, for the sake of argument, Pixel 3, a fairly modern smartphone, or whether it's something slightly more old-fashioned, or a water bottle, or a hammer, all of these things are tools. And tools are designed to be used by humans. Humans have eyes, noses, mouths, hands, feet, various different ways in which they can interact with objects. But the point is that in the past, we have been able to use tools very intuitively. Because when you look at something like a hammer, it has I should have brought a prop hammer, it would have been more fun, because I could wave it around. But it has a handle which you grab, and it has a weighted end with which you hit things. And it's very, very easy and intuitive to use a tool like this. You don't have to spend too much time training how to use it. You can teach somebody else how to use it in 5 seconds. Maybe not 5, because they'll hit their own fingers, but it's a very, very straightforward tool to use. And that's quite important, because modern software tools are not that easy to use. They've gotten a bit easier, but there was a time when they were not easy to use at all. So if we consider what I mean by that, and the introduction talked about this a little bit, This is a very old-fashioned computer. Some of you might see it in old offices, but it's got a mouse and a keyboard and a screen. So if you think about what that means, it requires an abstraction, where a hammer is very straightforward. A hammer is essentially a tool that I hit, and the thing that I'm moving actually has an impact. With a mouse and a keyboard, you have horizontal movement of a mouse, I'm right-handed, typing on the keyboard, and it gives an input which is not directly connected to what you're doing. The input is vertical of the mouse, but the movement is horizontal. For all of us who grew up with a mouse and a keyboard, this feels completely normal, but it's actually not completely normal. If you ever try and teach someone, for example, some of us might have taught our parents how to use computers, and sometimes things like the file system, they'll go, where are my mother phones me frequently. She goes, where are my files? Mom, where did you put them? In Word. Okay, no, Mom, the files are not in Word, the files are on the desk. Okay. How do you explain that? The whole idea of having to use metaphors to understand how files are stored and metaphors to understand how computers work is very complicated. So children don't automatically learn how to use these things, but children can learn how to use hammers and basic tools very easily. So there has been a transition from the recent past to the current present, where interfaces have become far more intimate and humanistic. So the abstraction of a mouse and a keyboard that I've just been describing has slowly evolved into something that's much more intimate. For example, the things we're all familiar with, a pinch zoom, a tap, a swipe, as was just being described. Now, those kinds of touches, because they're more connected to the way in which our bodies work anyway, are much easier to understand. That's one of the reasons why when you look at 5- and 6-year-old kids, they're picking up fairly sophisticated computers. The joke goes that any of our smartphones have more computing power than the entire Apollo program needed to land a man on the moon. Yet a child can pick it up and use it very easily. In many cases, the child surpasses the parents. So parents are going, I don't understand. My child is picking up my iPhone and is doing all these things. I don't know what they're doing, but they're doing them because it's so easy to use. And that's a very fascinating trajectory, because the question is, where does that go? What happens if you continue down the path of making things much more humanistic? By the way, I do apologize in advance in case I cough. I've been nursing a little bit of bronchitis over the last 2 weeks, and I hope it's not too loud when it comes out of the microphone. Anyway, back to the presentation. So we went from the abstraction of a mouse and a keyboard to a slightly more tactile, more humanistic way of touching a computer. What happens next? Well, I believe that we continue down this path, and this, when I say future, by the way, some of this is already here, as we'll address in a bit. So we can use many more aspects of our senses to communicate with our computational devices. Voice, gesture, and augmented reality are the three that I want to talk about very briefly. I don't know how popular, actually, can somebody tell me, because I don't know the Croatian market. Does Amazon Echo and Amazon Alexa exist in the Croatian market at all? No? Okay, for those who don't know, most of you do, but for those who don't know, Amazon's devices, like the Amazon Dot, which is what this is a picture of, it's about this big, it's like the size of a hockey puck. It's a device which is connected to your Amazon account, and it's constantly listening to what you're doing around your house. Now, that's a little weird, but we can talk about the bad things about it, but let's talk about the good things. The good things is you can speak to it whenever you want, and you can say, hey, I'm out of toilet paper. Alexa, order some toilet paper. And it'll automatically go and get the toilet paper that you bought last time. It'll pay with a credit card you paid with last time, and it'll arrive 24 hours later, and you don't have to do anything. So voice communication with computers already exists, and it's something that's in all Alexa devices today. Your phone can do it. Google phones have Google Now. Apple phones have Siri. So voice is very much a platform that's being explored already and will continue to be explored as a way in which you can interact with your computer. Gestures. Well, over there is Justin Trudeau in the bottom right. He's the Prime Minister of Canada. He is wearing a Microsoft HoloLens. He's also using his hands to communicate with the device. So gesture controls. Again, remember that I'm trying to trace a path from a history of abstraction to something that's more humanistic and natural of the way in which you touch your computer. And the next step is to wave and point. For example, if you were my friend and you say, hey, how do you get to the Starbucks? I might go, oh, it's over there. I'll point. I'm not going to draw you a map. Why would I draw you a map requiring you to translate something spatial into something flat and then back into something spatial again? I'll just point. So the idea of using your body in different ways to communicate with computers is, again, very easy for people to understand and learn. And that's one of the reasons why I believe that we will continue down this path of communicating with our computers in a much more naturalistic way. And as far as augmented reality is concerned, I want to explain for everybody who hasn't had a chance to try these devices the difference between virtual reality and augmented reality. Virtual reality. Most of you will have heard of virtual reality. Virtual reality is you put on a headset and you look around and you could be anywhere. For example, we're sitting in a conference room, but we could be underwater, or we could be on the moon. We could be absolutely anywhere. And that's fine. It's interesting. If you've seen Spielberg's Ready Player One, you can see a version of the future of how Hollywood imagines virtual reality would work. But augmented reality is very different. If I'm sitting here and I'm wearing an augmented reality display, I can see everything. Sorry for you who can't see me, I'm just using this as a prop. I can see everything else as normal, but I can also see something over here that doesn't exist. And I can move around it and look at it. But the point is, augmented reality adds a layer to the existing world, whereas virtual reality replaces the entire world with something else. Many of you have seen augmented reality in the form of ARKit. ARKit is Apple's version of augmented reality. You can use your phone to move around and see little stickers. Snapchat does it with AR stickers. My point is that I strongly believe that in the future, screens will disappear. In fact, oops, sorry, that's a different slide. I got my slides the wrong way around. I believe that in the future, there is a high possibility as a future where there's absolutely no screens. In fact, there's a high possibility there's a future in which technology continues to become more subtle and humanistic and actually disappears. For example, I talked about the Amazon Echo Dot. It's about the size of a hockey puck. It's extremely small, yet it has a connection to Amazon's entire cloud. So the entire computational power of Amazon is condensed into something that's the size of, well, smaller than a can of Coke. What does that mean? Well, I apologize if you can't see the colors. The blue refers to intuition, and the red refers to skill required. So let me talk about what that means. Remember, I'm now summarizing the previous few slides. Remember I talked about the hammer. So in the extreme past, we'll talk about the skills required first. The skills required to use tools was extremely small. What did you have? Axes and hammers and brooms. I mean, you pick up a hammer and you go, okay, do this, fine. That's really easy. And then as technology decided to increase, my father learned to program in the civil engineering faculty in Folnegovićevo naselje with a computer with punch cards, which was extremely complicated. There was no keyboard. And it was, in those days, programming a computer device was a very, very arduous task, and very few people could do it, which is why the skill required to use the tool, the computer spikes and goes to the top. And it stayed there for a good long time. It only started to come down when computers became more like an iPhone. In other words, the biggest thing that Apple did is not that they made a sexy portable smartphone. They made iTunes. They made it very easy for people to install applications onto their phone. That is a massive, massive step. Prior to the iPhone and iTunes, if you had asked somebody, hey, can you install an application on your Windows computer? Yeah, good luck. They'd have to be some kind of a geek or an IT professional in order to do it. But nowadays, pretty much everybody can just go, oh, download an app, hit a button, and I've got a new icon on my phone. So the skill required went down in order to use these tools, and it continues to go down because of what I described before, the humanistic way in which we're interacting. Now, conversely, the intuition is the flip side of that graph. It's essentially, I mean, I could have just said, hey, it's the flip side, but I wanted to highlight it here. Highly intuitive use cases of tools require low amounts of skills, and again, we're now flipping around because we're going back to a UX, a way of interacting with our devices that is much more natural and much more humanistic. And that is a very good thing, but make no mistake, this does not mean that we're going backwards. We're not regressing into the past. And the reason we're not regressing into the past is because augmented reality devices in the Amazon Echo Dot are a lot more powerful than hammers. So even though the tools are getting much easier to use, which is kind of like the tools were back in the day, 50 or 100 years ago, the tools themselves are much more powerful. The cloud is more powerful, and the CPUs are much more powerful. So I think that's quite important. Most relevantly, what I think is important is that I believe that the future is the absence of technology rather than the presence. I do not mean that I think that technology stops functioning, not at all. I'm the biggest geek there is. I buy all the new toys and I play with them and I try to understand how to make them more useful to me and to everybody else. What I believe is that they will disappear because we won't notice them as much. 10 years ago, if you walked into somebody's house and you thought, hey, look, there's your computer area, they would have their desk with their desktop computer, with their printer, maybe a scanner, maybe 2 monitors, depending on what kind of work they were doing. It was a dedicated area for the computer. Nowadays, you go to somebody's house, they'll have Wi-Fi throughout the house, they might have an iPad in the kitchen, maybe they've got another one in the living room, and they've got their phone by the bed the whole time. The point is, there's way more powerful technology there, but you don't see it as much. It's bled into our environment. So that's what I mean by this. I don't want you guys to get the wrong idea and think that I somehow think the technology will disappear. Far from it. So let me talk about the key differences that I think about when I talk about the future of UX. I think there's an important difference here. I have to go fairly quickly because I tend to talk about these things for a very long time normally, and I split it into multiple sessions. But in this case, I've only got one, plus I want to have an opportunity for people to ask questions. So, intent. In the old days, nowadays, or even in the last 5 years, when you want to use your computer, what happens is you have an explicit intent when you want to do something. For example, I hate to use my mother as an example, but she's not here, so I can. My mother will call me and she'll say, Bratzo is what she calls me, it's my nickname from when I was a kid. She'll say, Bratzo, how do I send Tihana is my sister. How do I send Tihana a picture? I don't know how to do it. I've taken a picture. I have no idea. How do I attach it? What do I do? The point is she knows what she wants to do, but she doesn't know how to do it. So that's a failure of UX, but that's okay because I can explain it to her. So that's what I mean by explicit intent. Explicit intent means you know how to do something. You know what you want to do, but you don't know how to do it. By the way, it doesn't have to be computational. I'm hungry is a specific intent also. I'm hungry means, shit, I'm hungry. What restaurant is open? So in my head, I have to translate my explicit intent into a form that this device can understand. Search for a restaurant, define a filter, must be open now, and the database responds with some kind of results. However, I think it's important to note that one of the key ways in which UX is going to change in the future is that implied intent becomes possible, where it didn't used to be. With older devices, the only thing they can understand is what we told them. Unless I typed in something on my keyboard or I used my mouse, my computer didn't know I was there. It doesn't know anything. It's dumb. It's dumb. It's not sensitive. All it does is it waits for me to give it a command. Now, I may not know how to do that, but if I do, again, the computer does nothing on its own until I tell it to do something. But it's very different these days. Because of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and Internet of Things, I mean, we saw an example of that, if you think about it here, with the Amazon Dot, because the Amazon Dot is passively, Echo Dot. The Echo Dot is passively monitoring you all the time. By the way, so is the Facebook app, and so are a number of other things. So the idea with this is that there are many devices out there that are part of the user experience that you might not realize. For example, does autocomplete work in Croatian when you search in Google? Does anyone know that? Yeah, it does. So when autocomplete completes what you're doing, they don't know anything about you, not at all. What they're doing is you start typing a word, and they go, they're in Zagreb, I'm going to guess that's in Croatian. Okay, what does my database say is frequently searched for words from Zagreb that start with this letter? Right, let me just give them the most frequently searched one and see if that matches. And many people who don't understand technology might go, oh my fucking God, I can't believe it, they're reading my mind. They're not reading your mind at all, they're pattern matching. But AI is a bit like autocomplete for your thoughts, because what they're doing is they're trying to guess based on the patterns that they have. And they have a lot of patterns. They have your social media patterns. In the case of Google, which, by the way, controls Android, controls Google Maps, controls Gmail, which means they can and do read all your Gmail and all your Android phone histories. So, and Android is, guess what, the most popular platform in the world. Why? Because it's free. Why does Google make it free? Because they don't give a shit about making money on Android. They make money on data. They make money on that. So it's important to understand that a big part of the UX of the future is not just the thing you think, which is how do you touch and interact with the thing. It's also the fact that the system itself is getting smarter about what you want. So the interaction if you define UX as, I have a problem, I want a result, the speed with which you can get to that result is not just a function of your intelligence or a function of the ability of the interface. It's a function of the ability of the whole ecosystem, and that's where the AI stuff comes in. There's actually, I don't know if everyone's going to stick around for the whole day, but there's a panel specifically about AI in marketing that I'm a part of that's at 4, and that's in Croatian. That's going to be exciting, because my vocabulary in Croatian is about the equivalent of an 18-year-old. So that should be a challenge for me. What I wanted to show really quickly is a 1-minute video about what this looks like when you combine AI and machine learning and new forms of interfaces and augmented reality. This video was not made by me. It was made by a guy called Keiichi Matsuda. Some of you might have seen it. It's called Hyper Reality. If you are interested, you can watch the whole thing. It's about 8 minutes long. But I just took an excerpt here so people can understand what this might look like in the future. This is specifically an advertising and marketing conference, so this focuses on a more marketing point of view of what augmented reality would look like. So yeah, let's check that out.
Bueno.
Queso. Queso de vaca. Queso de...
Más información sobre
Hola Juliana, me alegra verte.
Okay, so I don't know about you, but I think that's really fucking scary and weird. So, so I hope it doesn't look like that. But it's fascinating because it could. So what you saw, I mean, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the video, but you saw a person walking around. Initially, there was a scene in the street, and everything was overlaid, telling you where you can go, where you can't go, where the cars will go, where your next Uber will be, which store was giving you a special offer and a discount if you go in the next 2 minutes. And then you saw a shopping scene, and there was a shopping cart you were pushing around, and they gamified it. So just like when you play a video game, if you put the shampoo into the shopping basket in the next 1 minute, you get a 10% discount. Quick, 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 let's go get it. And then there was a little kind of artificial, what's that thing called? The Tamagotchi. There was a little Tamagotchi doll which you could constantly feed with different pieces of information. It's fascinating, but I believe that it's an example of what we hope to avoid. So that's kind of what I'm trying to ask here is, do we really want this kind of future? What does it mean? Because I didn't really do a good job of describing what I do and why I'm here. I think one of the reasons why they chose me is because I tend to just talk a lot of shit and hopefully something useful comes out. But no, my background is in software development and user interface design, but also in filmmaking. So I'm a documentary filmmaker, which is one of the reasons why I ended up moving to Los Angeles. But I currently work in augmented reality, and I have been for the last few years. So I build a lot of augmented reality systems to try and figure out ways in which we can move the whole industry forward. And what I hope to avoid is creating some sort of god-awful experience like that, because if that's what the world ends up being, we have a big problem. By the way, we already have a big problem, and the reason we already have a big problem is because everybody's walking around this the whole time, and they're not really reacting normally. So what we want to do is make people look up. So one of the things that I want to do, and I think is really important, is to make people look up and engage. And that's the biggest thing, that's the biggest reason why I'm excited about augmented reality, because if I can move the screen from here to here, that is a huge thing, because I've gotten you to re-engage with the rest of the world. Now, yes, there are going to need to be some tricks to that, because I can't break the addiction to Facebook and Instagram in 5 seconds, nor do we really need to. But a big step is unlocking the head. I don't want the head to be looking down, I want the head to be looking up. So if there's one thing that's the big takeaway for what I'm trying to tell you about interfaces is, the reason why I think things need to move away from screens is because I think that if we don't look up, the planet is screwed. I don't just mean, oh yeah, it's bad because the teenagers won't be able to make friends and no one will have sex anymore. No, the planet is screwed because they're going to be looking at the screens all the time. They're going to miss it. So anyway, no, this is not what we want. I wanted to point out, by the way, I've referred to Hollywood a few times in this, and I showed you a concept video just now. It's tempting to think, yeah, Nick, this is great, but you live in LA and none of this really matters because, look, you know, we're just trying to figure out how to sell slightly more holidays or hotel rooms. What difference does this make? Well, this is already here. So this is a Magic Leap device. I don't know how, has anyone here tried this on before? Anyone in the audience? Well, if you're really interested, you can come check it out. This is a development kit. It's called the ML1, and this is currently available. It's only available, I believe, in the US. I think they're selling these kits for, I think, $4,000 each, so they're clearly not yet the kind of thing that a consumer would buy, but they're trying to get the price and the size down. My point is that this is not very big in comparison to what it was 5 years ago. And this is capable of scanning the entire environment and drawing an artificial object that it'll put on that table. It's impossible to demonstrate without trying it, which is why I just brought it to wave it around. Imagine, for example, there's a packet of cornflakes, a cereal, some sort of consumer product is right there. This thing is so accurate that if I go behind and I look like this, I won't see it, because it'll be blocked by this, because the system knows where all the other geometry is. So it can draw artificial objects very accurately in your space. And again, it looks ugly, but this is today. It's already available today. Sony has multiple patents on this kind of technology in contact lenses. To be clear, you can see through this, but you can also see an artificial image. So for some of you who are fans of Black Mirror, and if you're not, you should be, because Charlie Brooker, who's the creator of Black Mirror, does some very interesting things. First and foremost, it's a TV show. First and foremost, it's a very good show, very interesting storylines, and well acted and well directed. But also the way in which they use technology and the examples they give, this technology is part of the story. But there's a couple of episodes that talk about marketing and that talk about the way in which these kinds of devices might change the way in which humans interact with each other in the future and humans interact with computers. Black Mirror is a very good example of a slightly nihilistic but still very interesting look at how things might work in the future. But there is one more thing, which is haptics. Just in case somebody calls me out on the fact that I left haptics out. You might think, okay, great, let's assume for the moment that we all have extremely small, there's a number of people wearing glasses here. I mean, there are many modern augmented reality displays that are small enough to fit inside glasses. Let's assume we all have those. So we can all see these artificial objects. Okay, but what happens when I try and pick it up? Nothing, because it's not bloody there. So that's not very nice, because what am I supposed to do with an object that I can't actually even pick up like I can this remote? That's what haptics is. Haptic feedback or haptic interfaces are interfaces that feel as though you're gripping something, but it's not actually there. Now, haptic interfaces are very, very new, but they are coming. It's a very important thing, I believe, to solve this correctly. At the moment, it doesn't yet exist. This is, I'm throwing a dart far into the future. But yeah, I think that if we can get augmented reality sorted out correctly, which we're well on our way, and by the way, I'm not going to be here for the next 2 hours, but I will be back. And if anybody is interested in trying the Magic Leap device, by all means, just come and find me. I'll just have one in the bag, so if anybody wants to. It's not going to. I don't know how many there are in Croatia. I imagine there aren't that many yet. So if you're interested in that sort of thing, by all means, hit me up. So there is one other way that you can do haptics, aside from the magical ways in which people have been talking about doing them in augmented reality, and that is this, which is another Hollywood reference. That's James Marsden, Evan Rachel Wood in Westworld, who I imagine some people in the audience will have seen it because it's a pretty popular show. So for those of you who haven't seen it, these guys are robots. I hope I haven't spoiled the show by telling you that. But they're artificial intelligence robots which you can touch. Now, if you think about it, that's a very fascinating way to solve a user interface problem. You're like, okay, well, I could draw an artificial robot using augmented reality that you then can't touch or interact with in any way because they're not actually there, or I can just put an actual real robot there. So a fascinating example of another way to create a fascinating environment with a whole different form of UX. I'm cheating here slightly because obviously I'm borrowing an existing Hollywood visual, but it's not, there are a number of companies out there that are making robots. Some of you might have seen the viral videos of the Boston Dynamics robot that can walk up and down stairs and do cartwheels, open doors. Some of you might have seen the Black Mirror episode of the robot dogs that kill everybody. If you haven't, again, good one to check out. So the idea, if you try to guess what Silicon Valley is investing in, spending hundreds of millions of dollars on, and you guessed augmented reality, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and robotics, you would be 100% right. So those four things that I just outlined are the future of all forms of computing, and by association are the future of all forms of user interface design and user experience. So this was a very, very long-winded way of getting to what I was trying to say, but I hope you followed me along the journey for a little bit. The last thing I want to say is that's me, and that's my email, and that's me on Instagram. And I'm happy to answer questions. I think we don't have that much time, but we might have a few minutes. Do we have a mic? Or just shout it out. The question is, what about privacy? Well, privacy is a very interesting problem, especially in the EU, because in the US they seem to kind of ignore it until they get yelled at enough. Silicon Valley has a habit of doing move fast and break things as a form of design and development. They just go, hey, we built this thing, or we can build it, let's just build it and see what happens. Oh shit, we just gave up everybody's data to absolutely everybody everywhere, now what do we do? And you sometimes can't, as they say, put the genie back in the box. So privacy is a fascinating problem, and it's all the more fascinating if you go back to that video that I showed you the snippet of, the guy walking around the supermarket with a trolley, and everything is in his field of view the whole time. It's completely overwhelming. Privacy is a really serious problem. The most serious problem about privacy is that a lot of people don't care. The people who care, who should care, the users, don't, because the saying goes, if you can't figure out, you might have heard this before in Croatian, I'll just say the English version. If you're using a product, anything, any kind of product, wherever it is, and you can't figure out, and you think it's free, and you can't figure out who is actually being taken advantage of here, the answer is it's you. So for example, in Facebook, you go, wow, that's so amazing. I'm talking to my friends and I can see all these pictures. Yeah, and I don't pay for anything. Yeah, you do. You're the product. You're the thing that's being sold. But even when you tell people this, they don't care. They'll still continue to use these things. So it's a very serious problem, and I don't know what the correct answer to the question is. I just know that one of the reasons why it's an extra complicated problem is because many of the users just go, oh, well, I don't care. I mean, how many people, when they install an application on your iPhone or your Android phone, and the application says, please allow access to, I don't know, address book, contacts, a camera, etc., etc., how many people actually say no? I mean, not zero, but less than 10%. So that means most people go, oh, I want Instagram, okay, good, I've got it. And you don't even read it. And that's a big problem, because you're trying to fight a battle that's an important battle to fight. I'm not saying you personally, you just asked the question, but it's an important battle to fight, but it's a battle, the first part of the battle is to convince everybody else that it's an important battle. Any other questions? Otherwise, I think we have to wrap up. No, I'm just saying, I think we're out. Does anybody else want anything else? Or otherwise, we can just move. Oh, we got more. Scott, go for it.
What would be the most important thing that we can begin doing now to embrace this and integrate into our companies?
Thank you for that. Good question. So for those who didn't hear the question was, what do I think is the most important thing that we can begin doing now to embrace this and to integrate this into our companies? Well, The question is always interesting to consider, when is this important? Because I go to a lot of conferences, I sit on the other side, I'm listening to people talk about the future, and it's very tempting to just go, yeah, okay, that's great, but I need to pay my rent next month. I don't give a shit about this. This is in the future. This is like not my problem. It's in 5 years, it's in 10 years. Well, except it is here today, because the people who you're interacting with smartphones, there's a reason why Apple launched ARKit and Google launched AR Core. There's a reason why Pokemon Go, as annoying as Pokemon Go was such a phenomenon, because people are fascinated. It's very natural to explore the outside world and interact with the outside world, because we've all been doing that since we were children. It doesn't require any technical knowledge or computers. And the idea of being able to extend, basically break the boundaries of the screen and extend away from the screen is something that I think will happen naturally. And it's important for all of us, whether we are marketers or whether we are technology developers, like in my case, to experiment and understand how this stuff works now, because now is when the foundations of these systems are being built. If you wait for another 2-3 years, okay, it'll still exist, but you won't have had a chance to play a part in it. So if there is the ability to experiment or to try doing different ARKit projects, by all means do that. To be clear, while this device is expensive and it's an experiment R&D project right now, every iPhone sold in the last 2 years and every Android phone sold in the last 2 years supports augmented reality through ARKit. And Snapchat and Instagram and Facebook and Google are making a big push to include augmented reality as a standard tool set. So I think it's important for everybody who works in any aspect of the digital and advertising and marketing ecosystem to understand how will these interfaces work and what do users expect? How can you do stuff to engage with them? So yes, I think it's incumbent on everybody to try and learn and experiment as much as possible in this space. Don't worry too much about the robots taking over the world. I mean, I worry about stuff like that because I'm trying to build bits of it. But yeah, for now, baby steps would be to figure out how you could use augmented reality and all other forms of interfaces like voice. I know many people are experimenting with a little bit of voice. The Amazon Alexa and the Siri APIs are slowly becoming more and more open, so you can build applications that leverage voice. Anyways, I hope that helps clarify things, but that's a very nice softball ending, Scott, so thank you for that. Very experienced presenter, giving me a nice question to end on. I appreciate everybody listening to me rant, and thank you very much, Tajana, and everybody else for having me here. And if you feel like listening to more of this, but this time in Croatian, we'll talk about it at 4, and that'll be about AI. Thanks again, guys.
Nick Bicanic. Thank you, man.
Hvala.
Love the talk, love the questions. Great brain, huge brain, love Nick, love Nick. But for such a smart guy, we need to teach you something. It's called spoiler alert.